Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Dixit, and I am the founder and CEO of Glimpse. So many of us have really wished a few times in our careers that we could choose a really interesting survey response or pick up the phone, um, ask some follow-up questions pretty much instantly. Today, Glimpse allows you to have ongoing conversations with all or with some portions of your research data. Imagine choosing a key audience segment, discovering your organization knows everything about them, and even having a conversation with them. Maybe you want to look at new messages, innovations, or ideas that you've never even shared before or even tested before. Right? So with this, you get the scale and representativeness of quality surveys with the depth of a focus group, with that always-on feedback of customers as if they were sitting in the room right with you. So today we're going to be talking through a real glimpse case study with one of our favorite clients, HubSpot, that highlights some of these futuristic capabilities. All right. So don't worry though. This isn't going to be an hour of me talking through a bunch of things. We're also going to be talking and sharing a couple of short interviews with some of our favorite people. First with Nick Nyhan, who's the former Chief Digital Officer of Kantar and former CEO of the WPP Data Alliance. And then with Radi Hindawi, who is an SVP at the customer experience firm InMoment. These guys have been working at the frontiers of audience understanding for a really long time. Okay, so it should be really, really interesting. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with some best practices and key takeaways that any marketer, researcher, or creator can use to apply to their work right now. All right, so just really quick, what is Glimpse? So our platform has been designed to allow users to be able to smartly, ask questions or use our system at every stage of the research cycle. Okay, everything from stating your business problem, it'll create your questions for you, right, to finding your audience members to answer questions, right? We have access to over 300 million people globally. Of course, you can decide to upload your own data sets, right? You can also synthesize your own data sets, but we'll get into that in another discussion. And then you can analyze your data, right? That allows you to be able to interact with charts and graphs and slice and dice and run your own filters and so forth. But then really it's supercharged with the ability to have AI directly interacting with your data sets. You can have conversations with them, right? You can decide to have it give you answers both deterministically from your data itself, but it'll also come up with probabilistic inferential answers to questions that might not be in your data sets, right? And this allows our users to be able to create better content, to be able to iterate better, to identify their next research cycle, all right? But today, our focus really is on chatting with the data, as I mentioned, all right? So there's so much data out there, right? And most of it is sitting in a virtual trash can, functionally inaccessible to the people who might want or need to use it, right? So that ability to bring the data to life by engaging in dynamic conversations with it, in the flow of your daily work, it's truly a game changer, right? So that ability to be able to test new ideas, concepts, against the mindsets and expectations of audiences that matter to you most, really is revolutionary. So with AI conversations, it allows and empowers teams to be able to extract insights fluidly, responding to real-time queries, and creating an ever-adaptive narrative. All right. So next, we're going to get into a really quick example to show you how AI can facilitate meaningful conversations with your data. The process is really simple, and I'll show that in the next slide. All right, so this is not meant to be a full demonstration of our platform. A lot of you might have seen it, some of you might not have, but please reach out to us to see a full-fledged demonstration of all the functionality. Really, the focus here is on showing you some cool stuff with regards to the AI conversations and chatting that I was speaking about a minute ago. Okay, so really quick though, you can see I have about 8 questions in my study. I can decide to open up and take a look at my results. Of course, everything in here is fully clickable. I can use them as filters. I can use them as crosstabs, et cetera, et cetera. Here is an open-ended question. You can see some sentiment analysis, some emotional analysis, really cool stuff, okay? On the right-hand side here, you can see some demographics. I can see everything from, on average for the average consumer study, you can see that we have about anywhere between 15 and 25 demographic data points automatically included with every study. Again, when you decide to upload your data, you can upload whatever you want, and it'll automatically segment out things into different questions and answers and so forth. All right, so let's decide to, and you can see in my example here, right, we have a tracker, about 3,000 responses that's been run over the course of the past year and a half or so, okay? Roughly 300 responses every couple months, okay? So let's decide that for our conversations, okay, I'm going to take a look at something interesting here. I'm going to decide to click into people who have a focus on technology or computers. Okay, so you can see my base size is now changed to about 650 instead of 3,000. Okay, and then I'm going to decide to inject, okay, distribution, so that is time, as well as gender, age, and education, okay? And that's going to be injected automatically into my conversations, my AI conversations. So, okay, so when I click on here, that brings me to my AI conversations. Okay, you can see base size is now 650, filtered down to people who have a interest in technology and computers. My selected cuts that I'm injecting directly into my conversation are, again, time, gender, age, and education. Okay, and then you can see that I have my first question here being, tell me some of the key differences over time. So automatically, right away, it answered me this question, right? And basically it told me, look, taking a look at awareness, okay? Early on, in early 2023, awareness was low. I started to go up higher and higher all the way through to the mid of 2024 when now we see awareness being pretty high, right? Sentiment, right? High at the beginning. Everyone was enthralled by AI, right? And you can see that it's telling you that sentiment is starting to shift, and it's actually getting lower over time, which is telling us that, again, that people are getting bored with AI, and it's everywhere now, and so that, which makes sense that sentiment's starting to go down. Okay, so you can see a number of different things that's telling you here about the actual data set itself. I asked the follow-up question, which is, how does education play a role in people's likelihood to embrace AI in the workspace? Again, it's giving me a bunch of different takeaways here. With overall, individuals with higher education levels appear more likely to be aware and positively inclined to embracing AI in the workplace. Again, that makes sense to me, right? And I can decide to ask follow-up questions. Tell me about key differences for age and gender. And then you can see it automatically, look how fast it is. It's automatically answering these questions for me directly. Again, giving me breakouts about gender, talking about awareness, sentiment, concern about the job market, et cetera, for both age and gender. Okay, so that's is what we call segment chat. This gives us the ability to take a look at the entire data set, right? or individual segments of the data set and ask it whatever questions you want, right? It can be something as simple as tell me about the data, or you can even have it help you and have it create content to engage these different segments or targets. It's very, very powerful, some of the things you can do here. Okay, so a quick case study before we get to our interviews. So as you guys might know, HubSpot's a big client of ours, right? So an exec at HubSpot was in a conversation, and then after some time, they realized the person that they were talking to was the ideal, HubSpot customer. So the next day, they reached out to their marketing team and insights team and made one request, which is, I want a more nuanced, complete, and human picture of the ideal HubSpot customer persona to be able to better shape product strategy and marketing. And I want to be able to have conversations with them, right? So the big question then facing the team was how to be able to use AI to extend the power of human research, right? To be able to make the customer picture more actionable, iterative, interactive than ever before, right? So using Glimpse, they're able to launch a series of studies, each with over 1,000 marketing and sales professionals. They analyze the survey data alongside with other market research data to add more depth and nuance to the existing segmentation that they had, right? And then again, using Glimpse, they're able to build this, this digital twin, or AI persona on a secure foundation of first-party data that allows for real-time feedback. You saw a brief example of that a minute ago, right? So in terms of impact, HubSpot and Glimpse, are now establishing this, this insights flywheel to deliver progressively more powerful outputs based on a foundation of human data, scaled and extended with AI. So the project's still underway, but HubSpot and Glimpse, we presented together some of the initial findings at an earlier conference this year, and then we're still working with HubSpot on furthering the partnership into other areas of product innovation. All right. So now it's time for a different type of chat. We have two interviews for you. First one is with Nick Nyhan. He's 25 years of data and research experience. He's a former chief digital officer at Kantar, and his motto is to make things easier, make it easier to use data and to do the right thing. Okay, and then we'll jump right into our second interview. That's with Radi Hindawi. He has 15 years of experience in research and strategy. He's an SVP at InMoment, and his motto is empowering brands to transform data into ROI. So I'm going to pass it off to Adam, all right? And Adam is going to interview both of them, and hopefully that should be interesting for all of you. And then we'll finish off after that with some best practices. Great, thank you.
I'm Nick Nyhan, and I am based in Brooklyn, New York. I've been in the data analytics space for over 25 years and started in traditional research techniques. There's the big promise that technology is going to change everything, and it takes a while. I think we're going through that with AI right now. Just like we went through that with mobile. It took a long time for mobile-based research to be accepted. It took a long time for online research to be accepted. Here we are in the age of AI, and it's going to go through the same hype curve of, well, we could do all this stuff. Well, maybe actually it's not quite as good or as easy to do as we thought. So here we are again.
As you know, Glimpse is building digital twins of audience segments in the platform and AI personas to help our clients have real-time conversations with virtual extensions of real people. And the point I always make is that those virtual extensions need to be extensions of something. There's two ways to do it. Either you're pulling the person from an LLM out of whole cloth, and of course the LLM has been trained on the entire corpus of the internet, Reddit, Instagram, etc. Or you're starting with small data, with proprietary first-party data, and you're drawing on the LLM to make inferences to help with the extensions. And I'm wondering if you've seen any instances of that approach working or what you think about it.
I think that is correct. Starting with a strong foundation and extending off of it. If you were pitching me on that and I was sitting in the buy side of the table, I would feel much more confident in that. I would also want to give you data, say, look, here's what we have. Can I load this in your system? And you can show me what you can do with it and how that extends or powers a digital twin extension, or, where do you see it working well? And where do you see it gappy? Because I'm going to be more trusting of you if you say, look, this is good for this, but it's not good for absolutely everything. Right. So and researchers need to feel that you're not just saying everything works for everything, but it works for these situations. So you pick the use cases and what the requirements are underneath it. And secondly, you do some parallel studies, right? So that's what we did with mobile and online and all these things that come along to validate and feel good about whether they're actually useful. There's a period of parallel testing and you do it two ways.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Now I want to ask you about one area, really valuable, important area of this ecosystem that you happen to know a lot about and have a lot of experience with, which is building and then targeting engaged audiences with your messages and your content. I think that just like some of these other questions, that world is potentially going to change really rapidly because of the technological capabilities. But before we get there, I just would ask you, for those of us who don't really know, like how does the brand or an agency think about influence now? How do they build it? How do they sell it? How do they reach it? How do they engage it?
The term audience really just means a group of people that you know something about and you want to try and find more people like that. Audience discovery is market research, analytics, insights, but working across not just what we can gather from a particular study, but also what we can gather from other touch points, especially digital touch points now, that also throw off data that we can combine into what we know and do discovery work on that. But discovery should also bridge the insights world and the media world, right? Today, typically, an audience is defined by who are we trying to go after, segment A, segment B. And that usually was defined demographically or with personas. And then those demographics were used as a proxy to find similar people. Of course, now that's sort of the who. That's been enhanced by first-party data collection. So instead of just having a rough profile, you actually have a list, right? So it's more like CRM, and you're like, these are the people we want. And in fact, these are the people. They don't just look like this. This is the list. And those lists have become the source of audience definition increasingly for those companies lucky enough to have one. And that's why everybody wants first-party data, because they know that's gold for better, more definitive audience definition. You can't just have that. You have to have some sort of connector so that you can find those audiences or similar audiences elsewhere. In the last 10 years, it's not just having a list or a segment, but having an ID that you can then find in other places so that you can discover those people where they are on different platforms or systems like the Trade Desk. So there's been a whole, LiveRamp, the story of LiveRamp is really about solving that pain point. And that's why they're doing so well. What was a goal in WPP and is possible now is those audiences were defined by proxies like demos or maybe a little behavioral data, or maybe if you could swing it in a little purchase or other stuff that comes from a DMP. But attitudinal data about what people think, their opinions, their language, their interests, that to me was the next phase that is only now starting to become more possible and real because some of those other things have been figured out. So linkages, how to model it, how to push the segment into this system or that system. And I think that's where, as an agency, if you're there selling your services for audience discovery and activation, you're often competing with other agencies that have very similar toolkits and audiences on the shelf, right? We're all sort of shopping in the same supermarkets, trade desk, whatever, and they have tons of stuff. If you're an agency just buying something off the shelf that any agency could buy, are you really providing any additional value or differentiation? So the question for agencies is, can we do audience discovery and definition that's a little bit better than just buying what's on the shelf? Yes, we can do that. We know what that CPM is. Maybe we don't care about the source. It's just easy. It says left-handed golfers. So that's who we want. Let's go buy left-handed golfers. But for agencies, they often have to differentiate. They have to show that they're doing something that's not something the client could just do themselves. They don't want to just be the cheapest. They want to be the best. So they need differentiation, and they need to show the client they have not just creativity, but also ways to make it real. That's where leveraging the attitudinal side, the language side, the opinion side, as well as those other ingredients about demographically, graphically, and technically, who are those people, to bring that to the audience and actually activate it on that way. And I really do think that language might be the area where not only is sort of insights to activation cooler when you can talk, where you can extend language. With AI, there's the ability to better segment and parse language into messaging that feels not just like, oh, you wanted this offer, so we gave you this offer. These people wanted this offer, we gave them that offer. But it's more nuanced than that. And it's in language that feels relevant and real. I would want to leverage language that my target audience uses. I would use AI and qualitative research to figure out that language and take that in to my creative team and my messaging team and saying, this is the audience, but this is also the language. And I think that's the next phase here.
I like it. That example really brought things to life. Now, let me ask you one question to close things out. If I'm a young, early career insights or media person, and I'm a little bit excited, but also sort of threatened by all this stuff that's happening. Maybe I'm used to buying audiences in the same old way. How should I think about my career differently and my relationships to other parts of the organization differently than I might have?
I love that question. I would try to become a data person and what I would call a narrative leader or narrative leadership. I'm a person familiar with data, but I also help find the stories, not just the stories that are based on the data, but also the stories that work for different audiences and the stories that connect different parts of my company. So sometimes you have to code switch when you talk to media people, CRM people, insights people, or finance people. A young person today needs to recognize the code switching that helps data move across the organization and bridge the gaps between organizational silos like media and insights. And a young person who's perhaps starting out could start in one of those silos: insights, media, CRM, digital analytics. But if they were smart, they would try and spend at least a year in each of those groups and move around horizontally to see how the data is used and potentially connectable between those discrete organizational components. I think that would be like getting an MBA times 5. After that, you would be able to not only talk the lingo of all those groups, but you be able to talk to the CMO or the CEO or the CFO and say, here's the inefficiencies in the system. Here's where we could squeeze a lot more value out of it. And here's how we can actually extend data from here this way or this way or this way. But ideally, we'll have sort of one source of truth, a unified profile that tells us who our customers are and who our target is. And it's usable and not too complicated, but it's something that bounces around the organization like a spine that connects and people can add to it or take from it, but it feels like it's of high value and connecting the different parts. So that's what I would advise to a young person starting out. Ultimately, that's actually not impossible to do. If you went to your boss and said, look, I'd like to spend a year or two doing this. Will you then help me go in this department? And then after that, so by 5 years from now, I'm so valuable to your company that you can't possibly live without me. I just think that's the way to go.
I love it. That's the best advice I think I've heard for young data focused people. And it's probably good advice for everyone as well. Although the experience you might get moving to a different function might be for a few days or a meeting or a conversation. It might not be like 2 years, but still the idea that we need to be storytellers at the core, data-driven storytellers, that we need to tailor our stories and code switch to understand what different audiences need to hear in order to accomplish goals, that we need to be connectors and that we need to be generalists who are agile and flexible in our thinking, as well as deep specialists. We need to oscillate between the two. That seems to me to be really good advice for anyone.
Yesterday, I was talking to an urban planner who works for cities, helping them become more climate resilient. And he went to architecture school, teaches at Stanford. He knows how to build systems, just like a researcher might know how to build a study. But to really make things happen in big cities or companies, he had to learn how to be that bridge role and code switch when talking to an engineer, an elected official, or someone who lives in the building he's thinking of drastically changing. And he really underscored for me that while he's building something that's quite technical, his skill is really that he's able to make other people understand the story. An engineer or someone at the Department of Transportation, you might call it a bioswale because that's your technical term in landscaping. But an engineer at DOT calls it a trench. In order for it to become a cool trench, you have to give it an acronym like HLDT, which stands for horizontal linear something trench. He had to do that packaging for different audiences. I think this is a different industry, but a similar example.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think we can all learn from it. I want to thank you for your time here today with us, Nick. I learned a tremendous amount, and I'm sure our viewers, our listeners will as well.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
My name is Radi Hindawi. I am the Senior Vice President of Strategic Insights, Managed Services, and Practitioner team at InMoment. Our role is to help our clients transform their data into actual insights.
Right. So I'm sure most of our listeners are already extraordinarily annoyed by the sheer quantity of Gen AI nonsense and hype out there. It might also be the case that generative AI or other forms of AI will drive really important transformations in the work that we're doing. And I'm curious, in terms of what you've seen so far, what are the big areas where generative AI applications might actually end up delivering value for organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about generative AI, there's always that big question of how do we utilize it correctly? The table stakes is how do I know faster, right? Generative AI being able to not fully design a survey, but help me save 40, 50, 60% of my time and design a survey in my past. Being able to clean data. We've had years ago, a lot of people just sitting there and cleaning data row by row. How do we start to automate with AI and hopefully 100% of someone's time and then generate quick intelligence? Here's the data that's coming in. what do I need to focus on in a matter of seconds? But what about other data points? Research is great. I'm not a fan of long-term surveys, but let's say they're great for now. But what about reviews and ratings and social and conversational intelligence and internal intelligence? How do you bring them all together? How can AI find the value and insights? And then again, utilizing, let's say, pulses or surveys to fill in the gaps as well. That is the vision and where we are seeing AI move with a lot of brands that we're working with today.
I think that over at Glimpse, we have much the same view. And one really fundamental question that I keep talking about with audiences and clients is the fact that generative AI, by its nature, inherently can allow us to look across differently structured data sets. Some more structured, some less structured, some quantitative, some more linguistic, some perhaps image-based. Why should it matter to a brand that they're now able to look across multiple data sets at the same time?
That's a great question. When you think about why you should start to bring in more data sets or why not stick to surveys, one of our quickest answers to brands is think about the younger generation, 18 to 24, younger, when we talk about the Gen Z, but even the future Gen Alpha generations, they're not taking surveys. And if they are, they're taking surveys that are faster, simpler, and get right to the point. Nobody wants to take a 50-question survey. This idea of bringing the data points together is you can solve 40, 50% of your questions with data that already exists, whether it's in your organization, social reviews, and anything from public. As you add more signals, you can try to analyze them manually. It's almost an essence. That's where AI can help you focus. Our biggest piece is how do you quantify that? We can help you reduce churn by 10%, which is $6 million. That's better than saying your MPA score went up by 3 points. That's the vision of where this whole thing is going as you bring in more signals.
Right. If you're a brand, and a lot of the listeners here are brand folks, so there's this incredible possibility to look across, say, social data, survey data, transaction data all at once. Those used to be totally separate teams that never talked to each other. They all had their own insights that were smart, but partially went up the ladder. And then somebody had to think about how they related to one another almost by gut. Like, do we trust the social? Do we trust the survey? Do we trust the transaction level data? How are brands going to have to rethink the way they're interacting with each other across functions now?
It's a good question about how things are going to change across organizations and stakeholders. The reality is it's already changing because there is a big push around proof value, proof ROI. A CEO, CFO, or CMO in an organization would probably say, great, my scores have gone up, but so what? Does that mean I have better retention, better loyalty? The development of having so many different data points and vendors, you're starting to see the shift of who cares? Just get us to the intelligence, get us to the actions, and have that in a level where it's transparent. Everyone jumps in, everyone can access. A marketing team can drive acquisition, a operational team can drive retention, but it's no longer separate. It's all linked together. We are seeing this more than ever before. If you're not quantifying the intelligence you're getting, you are probably going to start to see your programs get smaller and your departments converge with others, because that is the reality of where things are moving today with AI.
Yeah, I love it. So it also strikes me that another implication of what you're saying, we've been talking about really the inputs into the analysis process so far. Maybe we can think about the outputs. You had said that some of these transformations are table stakes. We get better research findings, more holistic ones, more actionable ones based on more sources of data. But if we go above the level of the table stakes and we think about what kinds of outputs the organization is really going to want, what are we talking about?
That's a great question. When you think about what the outputs could mean, the story is actually still very new. With what we're seeing with brands that we work with, I'll give you an example for one of our food service brands. Food taste and staff drive loyalty. We're seeing things like these 10 locations have these problems. If you solve them, you have potentially $7 million, $8 million, $9 million of growth. You could probably increase somebody's spend. You could probably decrease churn. You probably can decrease costs because employees are not leaving anymore. There's a huge transformation of the way we're thinking about data. And it's actually something that we have been pushing our partners and clients on. What's the bigger goal? Forgetting the metrics. Are you trying to drive retention? Great. Let's focus everything between AI and the data around retention and understand it from whatever perspective as well. So one thing I should add is it's a lot faster than ever before, where brands were taking months to do a driver's analysis. That's now minutes, and we're focusing on that level of actionability.
One metaphor I've been using a lot, it's not a very good one or a new one, but it's that we can use generative AI to essentially create the better power tool like a better drill. The holes are in the same places, but we drill a better hole faster. We get better research findings. We look at the surveys in more effective ways, et cetera. But we can think of it as a kind of transformative platform enabler as well, which is transcends, power tool world and gets us thinking about how everything's hooked into everything else differently. And one thing that Glimpse is working on is digital twins of entire segments of the audience, or virtual versions of AI personas that stakeholders within an organization, whether they're researchers or marketers or C-suite, can interact with in real time to test their decisions against. Another thing that we're working on is better, smarter audiences, activation audiences, so that we're not stuck with that big chasm between the segmentation and the audience where you lose all the nuance. If you look at some of the work you're doing and what your clients are looking for, what are some next generation outputs that you can imagine are going to become really important to them over the next few years?
Well, that's a great question. What are some of the generational AI outputs that our brands and partners are looking at? I'm going to slightly change that to who are the new stakeholders. The persona has changed. We work with researchers and analysts, but it's interesting how we have evolved to a level that we're working with marketing teams, operation teams, and executive teams. Just last week, we were with the board of directors of a nonprofit organization. The difference now is the outputs are changing. Again, the table stakes being score or drivers. The outputs are changing to when we brought in all these signals, here's the direction that our platform that utilizes AI is asking you to focus on. You have a problem with retention at these areas. Here's kind of the next phase of how you could do things. A marketing person may go in and say, okay, I need the platform to tell me, how do I increase my market share against these competitors? So again, it'll look into everything and go, oh, wow, have these two competitors, they're having a troubling month. And here's why. Here's what we recommend action around. Now, the one thing to also remember is AI is great, but AI is perfect. It might drive the direction, but there's that piece of how do you get to that next stage as you get those level of output? It's all about asking and getting, then enhancing getting.
So let me ask you a question about that. The way I think of this is that AI works best when you've engineered in moments of human friction and human judgment. It's not merely a mindset issue. It's also a process and platform issue. Are the tools you're working with actually, do they allow for human feedback? Are the processes you're designing, are you making sure that the outputs from the AI actually aren't like sub-optimizing for something crazy, that they're driving towards the goals that you all agree are important? When you guys internally or your clients are using Gen AI tools, how are you making sure there's space for human judgment?
Oh, that's a great question. How are you making sure you have the space for human judgments? AI is great, but what about the human element? There's a huge transformation with roles and definitions. I'll tell you from two perspectives. From the InMoment perspective, we had years ago a team of researchers, 20, 30, 40 people. We've now transformed researchers into consultants. They're still getting involved in the data. If Gen AI can take us 50% of the way, the consultants need to go deeper. We've gone from being traditional researchers to consultants to change managers, because now it's about, well, how do I make sense of this data? It's not just about, hey, the score went up and down, but is this a real situation of actionability? Can we actually drive this action? When AI came out, there was that fear of, does that mean I'm going to lose my job and so on? But when our clients have started to see is that their teams have transformed from researchers into change management consultants. So we're talking on such a high level with our brands now that they're coming back and saying, here are the actions we're going to take as an organization in partnership with our CMO. And here's the return that we can expect. Not to say data research is going away, but there is a huge evolution that we're seeing across teams and personas as well. An example of that is journey map. Years ago, you would have thousands of people spend time interviewing and taking data and trying to create journey maps. Now there are AI journey insight solutions. We have that as well within InMoment. Our clients, they bring data, it generates a journey, and all of a sudden the roles change. We don't need people to build the journey maps anymore. We need people to explain what's going on in each touch point. What is the focus? What's the action? What's the driver? What used to take traditional researchers, because InMoment had merged with Merit CX, and we still do a lot of these, what used to take us 30, 40 weeks, now takes us 30, 40 minutes to start, maybe 2 weeks to get to intelligence, and third and fourth week to get to action. It's just incredibly rapid.
All right. So I'm going to give you the hardest question now, because this is one that we're actively working on at Glimpse. Pretend I'm CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You're a high-powered consultant. The CEO wants to think differently about the role of market research and customer research. I don't understand why the teams are so separate and the insights I get about my customers aren't used effectively to develop new market opportunities. All the surveys and brand trackers I'm running don't help me retain my customers much better. I don't know why those worlds have to be so separate. In the future,
Oh, that's a great question. So we work with new executives, CEOs, CFOs. How do we approach what's going on and fill in the gaps? I go back to one of the points I said before, start with the why. So, hey, CEO, why should you start to think about this? You're probably losing quite a bit of money per year because everything is segregated and isolated, and you might have redundancy. The other big why here is you're missing out on huge ROI opportunities, retention, acquisition. If I throw a number like $6 million, it's probably more enticing than, hey, NPS is going up and down. But that's really why. The why being we can save and help you retain. Consolidation of data, going beyond surveys, bringing more signals, utilizing AI to get to intelligence quickly. Stop being reactive. Again, I'm a researcher, but one thing I will say, we researchers are more reactive than proactive, and get to that proactive level of AI. And hey, going now to what you are going to be able to see the CEO is saving, new money coming in, new revenue, and hopefully new profitability. So you're focusing on the top line. That's really how we approach those scenarios. We've been approaching for years, but especially with AI, it's a very aggressively proactive scenario than how it was before.
yeah, I love that as a place to end. The more holistic we are, the more we look at data in terms of its interrelationships, the more proactive we can be, the more oriented towards the future, the more we can seize emerging opportunities before the competition does, whether that has to do with retention or acquisition, and ultimately with the bottom line and the success of the organization.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Adam and Nick and Radi. That was really, really interesting. So best practices. Okay. So here's the bottom line. You want to put high quality research directly in the service of your business and organizational goals. Okay, so think about the data that you already have at your fingertips and the data that you would continuously like to gather, right? Next, if people speak about synthetic data, we're obviously playing in that space also. It's really interesting. Ask us about it. While that might play a role, and it will play a role, the need to collect fresh and relevant and also representative data will not go away, right? So it's finding that middle ground. It's not just collecting third-party web scraping. The need for first-party data will always play a role in shaping better outcomes. Okay. It's important to continuously look at your data and your outputs, evaluate, refine, iterate. We've been working with data and with AI data in particular for 4 or 5 years. And we're continuously refining and improving our outputs. Okay. With heaps of data, gives you the ability to create heaps of outputs, but garbage in, garbage out, right? Quality of data is extremely, extremely important, right? The Glimpse platform itself gives you the ability to ingest all of it, to bring it to life. Now think of the research outputs that would be most helpful to you. Again, bringing it back to better decisions, audiences, content, and insights. All right. So, key takeaways: have conversations with experts. Conversations like the ones we just had with Nick and Radi. Talk to experts if you can. Right. It's always really helpful. Dynamic AI conversations can truly transform your data, as we saw in our demo. With AI, it gives you the ability and the power to be able to test new ideas quickly and easily, and to create outputs on the back end of it, right? And then AI allows you to be able to create digital twins or digital personas to be able to offer deeper insights about your audiences, all right? So finally, I'm sure that some of you might be skeptical about things like synthetic data or digital twins. So are we, to be honest, though, right? So please, reach out to us, challenge us, ask us hard questions, and we'd love to talk to you further about Glimpse's solutions and how we might be able to work together. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed.